Fox News alert: President Trump is holding a meeting at the White House on the issue of human trafficking along the southern border as the commander-in-chief refuses to back away from the option of declaring a national emergency to build a border wall. And we are expecting comments from the president out of that meeting. This is Outnumbered, and I'm Melissa Francis. Here today, my partner, Harris Faulkner. Fox News contributor and Greg Gutfeld Show correspondent Katherine Timpf, Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov, and join us on the couch for the very first time, Mike Slater. He is host of the Mike Slater radio show. Yeah?
Look at those.
Woo! Look at those.
Fantastic. Those are gorgeous.
I'm no Mike Huckabee.
Well, no one is,
Mike.
He had
no
some
one is.
killer boots yesterday.
And they weren't cowboy boots. They were boots. We talked about it, and he said, I don't think he got them at that store in Fort Worth that you have to go to.
I bought boots there.
I've been there, too.
Yeah.
But I couldn't afford the pink ones I wanted.
These are much less impressive than Mike Huckabees.
Those are great, though. All right, you may need them.
That's right.
We got a lot of work
around
to
here.
do. There you go. Let's get to it. The president again warning lawmakers that he is ready to act if they won't budge on his question for more than $5 billion for a wall on our southern border. But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi maintaining a hard line, saying the committee will not be agreeing to any wall funding. In an interview with the New York Times, the president responding. Take a listen.
I think Nancy Pelosi is hurting our country very badly by doing what she's doing. And ultimately, I think I've set the table very nicely. I think people understand. Well, they understand, Peter. They didn't know what was going on the southern border. I've set the table. I've set the stage for doing what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait till the 15th. I think it's a waste of time.
The White House is reportedly already drafting a plan for the president to use his emergency powers to obtain wall funding. But Democrats warning against such a move. Watch.
What is this, a game to him? 35 days of a government shutdown, he's saying, I just set the stage for an emergency declaration, which he created himself. There's going to be a lawsuit if he does that, and I would hope that the judiciary, which is supposed to be an independent branch of government, will not allow him to have this kind of unfettered power.
Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really grateful that the president is framing this as a humanitarian issue, because it is. It was Amnesty International who said that 80% of women, migrants who come across our border, are raped along the way. So I live in San Diego, obviously busiest border crossing in the country. We have a wall now, but I've talked to people who have lived there decades ago, before there was a wall, what it was like. Chaos, absolute chaos. There's a complete no man's land between the two countries with an imaginary line in between them. And one area was called Dead Man's Canyon, full of migrants who have been robbed, raped, and murdered by, they call them bandits, and even corrupt Mexican police officers, murdering people in these canyons before we could take control. And you know what we did? We built a wall, and you know what's there? A mall. You can go to the Polo outlet store,
but explain to
and
us,
the wall's right there.
Why does a wall change what is happening on the way through? Because you're talking about people that are being victimized as they're trying to come into this country.
Ultimately, the goal is to put the coyotes out of business, right? So that they're not sending false hope to the migrants and the women and the children coming across that you can't even make it across illegally, and you have to properly go to a port of entry, where we can then take care of you and protect you from the bandits and the criminals and give you a proper health screening and bring you through the asylum process. We need order at the border, and you need to do that with a wall.
Doesn't it just move the place where they would be taken advantage of or assaulted further south? They would still be making their way to wherever the legal port of entry was, but being attacked somewhere else along the way. I'm just asking the question.
Unless you extend the wall, right? So in San Diego, people are
extend
frustrated.
the wall to Honduras?
No, wherever you need to go. Wherever you need to go across the border.
No, but I mean, does it just push it south of there where they would be?
Make the whole world a wall.
No, because then people wouldn't be coming up. There'd be no false hope that if you come up and make it past the wall,
people are still going to, especially if we are going to be cutting humanitarian aid to the countries that need it the most at this moment to deal with this crisis. And we all agree it's a humanitarian crisis. You're going to have people who are still going to be trying to leave. We're having some issues right now with Mexico, who's now said that they don't want to do the fast track system and keep the migrants there. People are going to continue to come, and I agree, we need order at the border, and we need a kind and compassionate and fair way of dealing with all of this. But you say people who lived in San Diego decades ago, we had a much bigger illegal immigration problem decades ago. Customs and Border Patrol data shows that it's 90% down from the year 2000. So when people push back, like Nancy Pelosi and others have been paying attention, Senator Hirano, and they say this is an emergency.
If that's the case, then why did they build 600+ miles of wall?
Oh, this isn't, listen, we've talked about this a number of times, and there are many.
If those numbers are true, and I don't doubt that your research is right, but if the end result of what you're saying were true, why did we need 600+ miles of? And by the way, we should ask Democrats specifically why that is.
They do, and many of them voted for it, and many today are even saying there should be extensions of physical barriers where it makes sense. We heard that from Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, et cetera. But the wall has obviously become a lightning rod issue here, and the reason that the numbers matter about it is you don't have the flow of migrants that you did have then, so it is unnecessary to be building a wall of the size that the president is asking
But Jessica,
for.
I think the point that a lot of people would make is that when you talk about there isn't the flow through this area because there's a wall there. I mean, and it's going to other spots where there isn't a wall. I think his point is that it's worked in San Diego.
And Democrats, or some Democrats, don't deny that they don't want the 600+.
But not Nancy Pelosi.
Well, she doesn't want to undo the walls that are already there.
Well,
so
she should. If she says walls are immoral, she should want to tear them all down. Look, I think that everyone in this situation is kind of acting like children. We have Republicans saying no wall, no deal. We have Democrats saying no deal with a wall. And I've seen, I mean, didn't you learn how to compromise in preschool? Like, I've seen preschool-age children better at compromising with how to share their crayons than I've seen these politicians being able to compromise and how to work the government. I'm concerned that there could be another shutdown because this is the exact same thing that was going on when we were in the shutdown.
Especially since we're not actually talking about a wall anymore.
So, you know what? I want to go back to what you said at the top, though, Mike, about how this is more of a crisis than an argument about, you know, whether or not drugs or other things are coming across. Because we just saw a huge haul of fentanyl go through and get caught through a port of entry. So that the drug problem, it seems like, is outside the boundaries of this as much. But you say that this should specifically be framed because amnesty.org, and I've got their website up here now, is putting out numbers like 1 in 20 women over the age of 15 has been raped. And they looked at more than just our country, but coming across borders. And when you have those migrations, 1 in 10 has experienced some form of sexual violence. That's a lot of people. Those are staggering numbers. And again, that's on the amnesty.org website. Yep. Anybody can check it. So this isn't even a matter of Democrats or Republicans having a vision about walls and barriers or whatnot. Those numbers are staggering. And whatever we can do to, you know, mitigate that crisis as human beings, we should want to do.
I am for speeding up the asylum process and the legal immigration process to great amounts. We need to speed it up a lot. I think that's totally fine. In San Diego County, just last week, the county voted on opening up a migrant shelter in downtown San Diego. We want migrants to go to an embassy in a neighboring country from where you're fleeing or to our port of entry so that we can then give you proper care and put you in a shelter and connect you with people and places to go. That's a compassionate thing to do.
Are you confident that we can do that? Because right now we have detention centers that are overrun. And this is a conversation that Jessica and I have all the time. And she's right about this. Like, we're at capacity as it is. And so that's going to be something.
So there's the compromise. There's the compromise, right? So we build some walls in some places where it's necessary, not everywhere, but where it's necessary in exchange for
where it's possible.
Sure. And in exchange for a lot more money to speed up the asylum process. Fair? That sounds pretty good.
Well, it does, and that's why Jim Clyburn said towards the end of the shutdown that he is confident that we can come to some compromise deal that includes it's a smart wall, right? It has technology where you need technology and extension of physical barriers where you need extension of physical barriers. I think that people can get on this.
That seems so reasonable. What you just said, it seems so easy.
And a top Democrat said it.
But so much of it is about semantics and wanting to say, oh, well, the wall will rally his base, it'll fire up his base, Trump will see it as a success, and they don't want to do that. I think so much of it is about politics.
North of 300,000 created jobs
that
came out today.
Yes.
I mean, they've got to fire up a compromise.
That should be firing up everyone, by the way.
Yeah, but they've got to fire up a compromise. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to pause here.
Yeah.
Nope, we're not. Okay. We're not going to pause.
Good, I'll keep talking. I'm a radio host. I got a lot more to say.
So meanwhile, January's jobs numbers, which I just talked about, are shattering expectations despite the recent partial government shutdown. The economy, as I mentioned, but here's the full number, 304,000 non-farm jobs we added. That marks 100 straight months of job growth. all-time record, people. The unemployment rate ticked slightly higher to 4%, which the Labor Department says is a likely technicality of the shutdown due to some workers being temporarily listed as unemployed. And wages also continued improving in January, growing 3.2% over the same period last year. Now, a look at the Dow. It's Friday. And boom, there it is. We're in green territory here. And that's good. You know, we've burst above 25,000 again, Melissa being Money Melissa, that is. So we're in some good territory there. And the president is touting the numbers by tweeting this: best January for the Dow in 30 years. We have by far the strongest economy in the world, exclamation point. I come to you, Money.
Yes, well, that is true. We do have a very strong economy. There are a couple things that are working in the market's favor right now. A China deal looks like it's getting closer to coming together. We're not going to get everything we want out of that.
Neither will they.
There was never a chance we were going to do that. It's going to be interesting to see what we do get. What the market wants to see is the tariff battle to end, and we're getting closer to that. The Federal Reserve is also looking to be a little more relaxed about tightening the money supply. That wage growth is great. People going back to work, obviously huge. More people coming in off the sidelines, thinking that they can get a job. I mean, these are the kind of things. Ironically, within that, though, you see we need more skilled labor, and we need more day workers, and we need labor. Immigration reform. That goes into this conversation as well, and would be a way to keep the economic ball rolling.
Yeah, proof that tax cuts work too.
Well,
there's got to be some connection there. Also, one more thing, because I remember there's a lot of talk during the shutdown that the shutdown was going to affect the economy, and there was some big bank president saying that the GDP growth may be zero this quarter because of the shutdown. I mean, clearly that had no effect whatsoever. And it was the Commerce Secretary who said if all these employees never got their back pay, it would only affect GDP by 0.3%.
And it would affect those people.
I want to go to Kat on this.
Big picture.
I want to go to Kat on this real quickly, if I can.
But we do need to see those GDP numbers when they actually come out, and it will have some impact on there. But I do believe you're right; it's temporary. Go ahead.
So Kat, you know, we talk about what it feels like. It's like the wind chill effect or the heat index of the economy, right? So all these numbers can be there, but it's how people feel. And I check in on that by seeing not only job creation, but as Melissa was pointing out, people now feeling like if they apply for a job, they can just get one. They don't need three that they needed after the Great Recession to match what they had.
Right. Yeah, the economy is strong, and people are feeling that. And I think that that's something that we need to all be excited about. I think that the tendency of a lot of Democrats is to kind of root for things to not go well, because then President Trump is doing well. And I think that this is something that we should all be celebrating today. We should all be happy that the shutdown didn't have the impact that a lot of Democrats were saying that it might have, or even some economists were saying that it might have. We should all be happy that that didn't happen.
Are you happy, Jessica, that this happened?
I'm like 90% happy, which is really high for me. But that's not true.
You're always super happy.
No, I am always happy. But I do think an interesting point to look at it is the wage growth, and that's what Democrat candidates for president are going to have to be focused on. I'm a big fan of Sherrod Brown, comes from Ohio, talks about his campaign, soon to be launched, I hope, is, you know, the slogan is dignity of work. And when you look at the wage growth, it was only a 3-cent wage growth in January and 85 cents over the last year. And when you look at how well the economy did do in terms of adding jobs, that's not as much growth as you would like to see. So when I look at these numbers, I think, yes, absolutely, 300,000 jobs. That's awesome. We'll wait for the GDP numbers. But we do need to be focusing on that wage growth. And I do think that's where Democrats will be putting their attention in this. No crumbs comments, of course.
Can I just ask a question about how the communication that's coming out of the Democratic Party now, and I'll even say it's more of a whole now, because it seems like there's much more voice amplitude about this issue, and that is the extra taxation of people who make above a certain amount.
About 10 million.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, if you look at candidates like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, they've been talking about this a long time. AOC is a great spokesperson.
So how do you raise wages? What's the plan? Are you going to redistribute that wealth? I'm just trying to understand.
There will be, I imagine, and not everyone has put out their plans, but you will see higher taxes on people who earn $10 million plus there.
So how does that help wages and other issues in the economy?
Well, money going back into the economy, more job creation.
You think the government's going to give up what they withhold in a higher
bracket? Well, if it's going through, if you look at the plans that Elizabeth Warren put out, for instance, the money that she is taxing, her billionaire's tax, goes directly to education, to health care. But it ends up being wages, because the economy is doing better. People are going to have more money in their pocket if they're not paying as much for health care, especially if there's a Medicare for all option.
you talk about these issues on the radio all the time with people who are doing the thing that Kat and I were talking about, that real kind of person on the ground. Not that billionaires aren't real people, but when you talk about extra taxes on them, what happens if they decide they don't want to do business here? That affects all those people who are calling into the radio station.
I've never talked to a business owner who does not want to hire people, who does not want to raise wages, who does not want to give more money for health insurance. They all want it, but they can't. They literally can't, especially in California, when there's another 12% tax rate, personal tax rate on top of that, and another corporate income tax rate. It's even harder and harder and harder, and more businesses are leaving, and it's just a good microcosm of the country where we're headed.
And one of the facts that's really tough is that wages fell under President Obama, and during that recovery, that was the time when wage growth was really stagnant and people fell further behind because of the structure of the economy, because of the restrictions.
Have we made it up?
And we've made up a lot of it, but this wage growth that's a pittance now is much better than under the last administration, and that's one of the big economic talking points, is that while everybody wants the same outcome, how you get there is different, and by taxing companies and taxing the rich and limiting the economy in that way, you make wages even more stagnant.
Yeah, and I want to slide in a question, too, and I know I was joking earlier, billionaires are people, too, but they are. Are we vilifying capitalism by this country right now?
Absolutely.
Why is that happening?
It's just the cool, hip thing now to vilify capitalism, which is really disgusting, because capitalism is the reason why so many people are able to be prosperous and we have freedom in this country and all those sorts of things. But now it's just seen as some evil thing amongst so many people, and socialism is becoming more popular, even though we can see real examples of where, you know, that didn't go so well.
And you gave the facts on what happens when you take those wealth dollars out of the economy.
And how many jobs did Howard Schultz create? I mean, it's worth talking about when you talk about he's a billionaire and he invented that company. It's a lot of jobs.
It will be interesting to see very quickly what happens if Oprah gets in, because she's a billionaire too. And just on the other side.
We'll slide on now. We are waiting to hear from the President of the United States. He's making remarks on border security, the economy, and other topics. We will bring you that as soon as that video from inside the White House is available. I see it snowing in that picture, too. Wow. And that there's a new report that may shoot down the Democrats' assertion that Donald Trump Jr. spoke to his father in advance of that infamous Trump Tower meeting. Whether this will cool down Democrats' demands that the president's son be investigated. Plus, the raging debate over abortion is engulfing Democrats, whether they just gave Republicans and the president a big political opening.
Every Democrat should have to answer for whether they stand with little baby girls who are born alive surviving an abortion, or whether they stand with Governor Northam's repugnant comments.
Awaiting the president's remarks now from inside the White House. He's holding a meeting, cabinet-level meeting, talking about human trafficking, and that folds right into the discussion about a barrier on our southern border. And in fact, we're starting to get some of the details out. So until we can show you that video, as soon as they wrap up, we'll play that out for you. But for now, here's what we know the president is saying. The Democrats can play their game, but they want to get off that topic as fast as possible. What's immoral is when someone comes into our country and kills innocent victims. If we didn't have a wall in Tijuana, people would be coming in by the tens of thousands. The committee is a waste of time. And of course, the president's already said that's because if their recommendation doesn't include a wall, it's a waste of time. About the cabinet, just so you know, Secretary of DHS Nielsen is saying that horrific ongoing crisis, insidious from a modern-day a form of modern-day slavery. Young girls being used as pawns. So she's talking about some of the crisis on our southern border. We will give you the notes as they come to us, but most importantly, we'll give you the words and the video from the President of the United States as we get it. Melissa?
Top White House advisor Kellyanne Conway weighing in on the uproar of remarks by Virginia Governor Ralph Northam about a proposed late-term abortion bill in the Senate. Here is Kellyanne Conway.
And in the case of Virginia, in the words of the governor, that as far as I know, he hasn't retracted, the baby's already born. We'll, quote, keep the infant comfortable and then have the mother consult with the physician. Is this America? Is this serious? Is that what it is to be pro-choice now? I think so.
Yesterday, Governor Northam responded to the growing criticism, saying that his comments are being taken out of context.
I regret that those comments have been mischaracterized. The personal insults toward me, I really find disgusting.
Also yesterday, Republican Senator Ben Sass says he does not believe the remarks are being mischaracterized. Here he is on the Daily Briefing.
The comments that the governor of Virginia said on the radio are about fourth trimester abortion. This is not abortion, this is infanticide, and every Democrat should have to answer for whether they stand with little baby girls who are born alive surviving an abortion, or whether they stand with Governor Northam's repugnant comments. I think the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates should have to answer for this.
Yeah.
And now, Politico is reporting that President Trump is telling conservative allies that he wants to talk about the issue of abortion in his State of the Union address on Tuesday. Liberty University President Jerry Falwell Jr. saying, quote, "The legislation in New York and Virginia is really forcing his hand, and he's reacting to people who have just gone off the rails. I don't think he's going to mention it for political reasons because I don't think it will help him much politically. I think he's doing it because he really believes it's important to protect life." Jessica, I wonder if, you know, bringing this political debate back around right now, but starting at such an extreme point of departure when you go back and you listen to actually what the governor said in his own words, that it strikes me as a very extreme position what he's saying, is it not?
Well, it is. Only 13% of Americans support late-term abortion, whereas a majority do support abortion up until the 20-week point.
But what he was talking about isn't late-term. I mean, it's after
It is
delivery.
actually. So the clarification that he gave initially, not yesterday's, but the day before, what was going on there is that that was a fetus that was not viable, that would have lived only a couple hours outside of the mother's body. And that's what he was talking about, and that's what the bill addresses. Actually, as Delegate Tran, who was the sponsor, made clear, this bill actually wasn't about extending the number of weeks at which you could have an abortion. It was about lowering the threshold to be able to have one from seeing 3 doctors down to 1 or 2, because that was too burdensome on women. The bill in New York was trying to reverse a 1970 decision that would have let women be punished under the penal code for having an abortion, treacherous territory that the president waded into during the election campaign, Rhode Island as well. Basically, because there are so many states that are rolling back protections for women to control their own bodies and to also have a right to privacy, like Ohio, Mississippi, and Texas, you have doctors coming from California to perform abortions there because the women do not have access to quality, affordable health care.
I just don't want to run out of time before we let Mike respond.
I'm grateful that in a way, I'm grateful the Democrats are overplaying their hand on this because they're proving the logical end of their principles here. There's this made-up idea of when we should allow abortion or not. What's 24 weeks? What is that? If it's not conception, you're just making stuff up. 24 weeks, 30 weeks, 40 weeks.
Let's
talk about viability, because yesterday you had a great back and forth with Mike Huckabee. I have a 2-year-old and a 10-month-old. They can't survive on their own. What is this idea of viability, right? You're always dependent on the mother. You're always dependent on parents, right? No, you roll your eyes on that. Like, my 10-month-old couldn't survive on its own.
There's a difference between a 10-month-old that eats externally versus a fetus in the womb that is connected to an umbilical cord.
But that's not what this is.
Yeah,
but that's not what this is.
We're talking about.
And I want to interject just with the fact of what was going on the radio here.
Yeah.
Appearing to discuss what would happen if a child was born after a failed attempt at abortion. The governor of Virginia, Northam, said, quote, "The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired, and then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother." So, you know, if
after it was delivered, it would be
This is talking
delivered.
about a baby that's already been born. That's not abortion.
So I just want to make that point clear so that we're all talking on the same page.
There's never a situation for the health of the mother when aborting the baby inside the womb saves the mother's life. Impossible, has never happened, will never happen, impossible. There's no situation where killing the baby in the womb saves the mother's life.
And I had this discussion with Mike Huckabee, it continued during the break. There are thousands of doctors who would disagree with you about that. Otherwise, no one would be performing abortions.
You deliver the baby and try to save the baby's life, which terminates the pregnancy, but you're not intentionally killing the baby.
All right.
Listen,
I feel like
this is the reason
I think
this
this
issue
is such a losing issue for Democrats. Like, as you pointed out, by far most Americans do not think that this is okay.
Yeah, and I'm glad the president's talking about it.
Not to mention the fact that there have been 2 statements now by the governor of Virginia, Northam, and you know what they say when you're trying to explain what you said clearly and there's documentation, it gets you further and further away from winning that message.
a pediatric doctor himself. What the GOP is doing in vilifying him as someone who supports infanticide and that he would be a baby killer seems completely out of step. And I'm not saying this is a popular position, but do you really think that of Governor Northam?
It was his own words. You know, the infant would be delivered and kept comfortable. And then at that point, they're going to decide what to do.
That's what I wish he would
just throw out, though. This is a wider discussion. You've got New York, you've got Rhode Island, you've got other states where this is being talked about, and maybe not in the incendiary form that we're discussing happened on the radio. But it's a topic among Democrats.
And we got to go. But I think we'll be discussing this many more times without question. Democrats looking to be facing a growing divide ahead of the 2020 primary on issues like taxes and health care. Some White House hopefuls pushing far-left policies, while others say that's the wrong way to go. The news today, another Democrat, Senator Cory Booker, is jumping into the 2020 race, where he fits into the already crowded field.
Fox News Alert. New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker is making it official today, announcing that he's throwing his hat into the ring for 2020. It comes amid what appears to be a growing divide among Democrats headed to the primaries. Potential candidates, former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg and Senator Amy Klobuchar, are criticizing a plan by 2020 candidate Kamala Harris to scrap private health insurance. Bloomberg also going after Senator Elizabeth Warren's proposed wealth tax, comparing it to socialism. But Warren doubled down, accusing billionaires of mooching off the system. Watch it.
I want these billionaires to stop being freeloaders. I want them to pick up their fair share. That's how we make a system that works not just for the rich and the powerful, but works for all of us. All I'm asking for is a little slice from the tippy top.
Just yesterday, independent Senator Bernie Sanders rolled out his plan to drastically increase taxes on the very rich. Self-described centrist and also uber wealthy. Former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, who's considering an independent bid for the White House, pushed back hard and lamented the Democrats' push to the left.
The Democratic Party is moving so far to that position, and that's not where I am. I don't believe there's any room for me as a centrist person who could get the nomination within the party today.
You saw the book on the little table there? Well, outside that book event, people were protesting where Schultz was promoting that book. Democrats have been very vocal in attacking him, fearing he would siphon votes from the Democratic nominee and hand the president in office right now a second term. Mike, as you watch this, and we talked a little bit about vilifying those people who, as Melissa pointed out, how many jobs did the CEO of Starbucks create? Where are we in all this?
Well, so sci-fi writer Robert Heinlein said the natural state of man is poverty. And it's only for the makers, not the moochers, the makers like Mr. Howard Schultz, that we have jobs, that we have industries, that we have growth, that we have prosperity. And when you start attacking those people, then you're going to fall back into a state of poverty, as Kat was talking about, as we see in Venezuela.
Can I ask you, what is the freeloading that Senator Warren is talking about? I mean, I don't understand. When I think of somebody who's freeloading, they're staying at your house and they won't leave after you said, hey, next Tuesday.
Isn't that the worst?
It's the same Obama. It's the same Obamas. You didn't build that. It's the same exact rhetoric that they're pulling out here again. They have to attack Howard Schultz. First of all, he's a white man. So in the world of intersection politics, those are two sins. He's a rich white man. So those are three terrible things.
Oh, wow.
And he's reasonable. And he's like, guys, you can't do these things that cost $4 trillion a year. This doesn't make any sense. So they're going to attack him in silence.
What's interesting is Cory Booker is pretty pro-business, too. He's, you know, and he supports things like charter schools. He's a lot more moderate than we've seen the other Democrats who are entering the race. So I'm sure that he'll get hit for those kinds of things. And I think it's quite interesting to think about what this is going to look like. Are they going to go with somebody super, super progressive like Elizabeth Warren, or are they going to go with somebody less progressive like Cory Booker?
What's interesting about that, Melissa, is remember Cory Booker, where he came from in Newark, New Jersey, he would need to do that in order to get things done. And you're lifting people out of, you know, different economic low economic periods and trying to lift them up. I mean, you're right, his background might not be in sync with where this party's going.
Pretty moderate.
It kind of goes back to your basic philosophy of how do we get there. And it's interesting, it's something Jessica said earlier on. Do you think that government creates jobs and creates wealth and is the answer? Or do you think that people and industry and we're responsible for ourselves, is government the solution, or is government oftentimes the problem. And, you know, like when you said give money, you know, the government taxes and then creates jobs, that's antithetical to what so many of us believe. But I understand that that's what Democrats believe. And we think people like Howard Schultz and you know, Steve Jobs and all these people who have become billionaires, and Howard Schultz, in his case, from nowhere, have created all these jobs, that is the heart of America, and that's what we stand for.
All right, I want to come to you, Jessica, but I want us to all watch Representative Omar on raising taxes.
We could increase the taxes that people are paying who are the extremely wealthy in our community, so 70%, 80%, we've had it as high as 90%. The other thing that we can do is we can tax corporations. 1% must pay their fair share.
So we've seen others, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, saying these similar things. I mean, is this where your party's going? 70, 80, 90% on
of a marginal tax rate on people earning over $10 million a year. I think a lot of people are hewing to that point, and I would add there's a pretty popular far-left progressive who's also a white man, and he has some money too, Bernie Sanders. So it's not just that Howard Schultz's crime is being of that demographic. Joe Biden as well, who I think will have a big influence on the race if he gets in there. There's no question that hewing to the left is the way to go in the primary. You saw Hillary Clinton get pushed there as well by Bernie Sanders, and then she came back more or less to the more moderate position for the general election, though it didn't pan out as I would have liked. I think the most interesting thing happening right now is about health insurance and what happened with Kamala Harris saying that she would eliminate private insurance.
That's not.
That almost, it's a bad idea, popular. And it almost seemed like she misspoke in saying it.
She said, I feel very strongly about this.
She said she feels very strongly. There's nothing, there would be no private insurance if there's Medicare for all, right? And she did say she supports Medicare for all. That would mean no more private insurance.
For all, actually,
and that,
how it would turn out. It would be Medicaid for all. It wouldn't be Medicare for all.
A poll last week found that only 37% of people support Medicare for all once they're informed and realize that that would mean the end of private insurance.
Yep.
And in countries like England, they have both.
We are tight to space today, so sometimes we may kind of cut in at each other because we're waiting to see the president in the White House. So I know if you're watching, you're wondering what's going on. That's happening. New developments in the infamous Trump Tower meeting during the 2016 campaign. The mystery over blocked phone calls involving Donald Trump Jr. has possibly been solved. And if the reports are true, this could be a big setback for Democrats' allegations that President Trump knew of that meeting beforehand. Details next.
Such a great thing.
A central mystery in the 2016 Trump Tower meeting may have been solved. There are now reports that investigators on the Senate Intel Committee have learned details of at least 2 calls Donald Trump Jr. got from blocked numbers before and after that meeting with a Russian lawyer. Those calls have long fueled speculation that they were from Don Jr.'s then candidate father. But according to those reports, those calls didn't involve the president. He tweeted, quote, "Just out, the big deal, very mysterious Don Jr. telephone calls after the innocent Trump Tower meeting that the media and Dems said were made to his father, me, were just conclusively found to not be made to me. They were made to friends and business associates of Don. Really sad." House Intel Chair Adam Schiff has expressed interest in issuing subpoenas to Donald Jr. and the Trump Organization for more detailed records on the Trump Tower meeting. Don Jr. calling out Schiff, tweeting, "Has anyone heard from Adam Schiff? I imagine he's busy leaking other confidential info from the House Intelligence Committee to change the subject. Hashtag full of Schiff." But Schiff says he is not dropping the investigation because Republicans won't hand over the phone records. Kat, I'm going to go to you.
It was such an obvious investigative step and is an obvious investigative step, and one that we will take very early on now that we are underway, and that is find out who Don Jr. was talking to about that meeting at Trump Tower. Those conversations could have taken place over the phone, or they could have taken place by Don Jr. walking down the hall to talk to Dad.
I love Jessica reading as President Trump. That's what I was laughing at. When you do the tweets, it's just, it is my jam.
I like to give him millennial vocal fry.
Yeah.
Big deal, small deal, doesn't matter that the calls weren't to Dad?
I think if the calls were to Dad, that would have been a very big deal, right? Because it's one thing for him to have taken this meeting, which I think we can all agree, not the smartest move that Don Jr.'s ever made, right? But it's one thing for him to have taken the meeting and another thing for him to have taken it on behalf of his father, of course. And if it had been that he was talking to his father, then I think that Democrats would be talking about that a lot, as they definitely should be, but it's surprising to me that he wasn't, because I'm someone who tells my dad everything, right? Like if someone doesn't, if a boy I like doesn't text me back, my dad's getting a phone call. So I would probably...
Let alone if you were getting some Russian
If I was getting some Russian, you know, opposition info, then my dad would definitely be getting a phone call. But it looks like this was not the case here. And I think that this, I don't know if it completely vindicates everything the way that the president is saying that it is, but it's definitely a plus side for Trump.
So I saw Melissa today came up again that Steve Bannon about a year ago had said, well, he wouldn't have called, he would have just walked upstairs. So do you think Democrats now, or I take the elevator, I don't know if you use the stairs in Trump Tower, I haven't been invited, but do you think that
you can shop there anytime?
Yeah. That's okay. Do you think this matters in the context of the narrative, or we just have to wait for the Mueller report? And...
I mean, it's all so deep down in the weeds. Yeah. I mean, I think the American people are so much more focused on what their family's doing and even who's going to win the Super Bowl. I mean, it just is, it's gone on for so long.
Yes, thank you, Melissa.
I don't...
Without the evidence of what we saw, before you speak, I just want to throw this out there. So, Kat, you said, well, how does this all fit in? Newsweek writes, Democrats have claimed Trump Jr.'s meeting at Trump Tower was the epicenter of Russia collusion in the 2016 presidential campaign.
What was the genesis of this whole thing? On your point, Melissa, what was the genesis? The accusation was that Donald Trump was colluding with the Kremlin to steal the election from Hillary Clinton. Give me some evidence of that.
So what do you do if the so-called epicenter is wiped away, Mike? Or at least challenged by the facts?
Until the what? I'm sorry?
Until the so-called, as they write, epicenter of the theory about Russia collusion with the campaign. What do you do when that's at least challenged by the facts?
I don't even, like, give me, what's a fact? Is there a fact?
Well, the fact is that it wasn't the two of them talking, it was Don Jr. talking to two other people, not his dad.
I think then Adam Schiff will still want those phone records, and he will want to talk to the people that Don Jr. did call and say, we have a Kremlin-backed lawyer coming in to chat to us about opposition research/adoptions. I think that's where we go from there, but we actually have to leave this discussion. The president says they're all good. His show of unity with America's intel chiefs amid speculation of a rift. Whether the media blew this out of proportion, we'll talk about it next.
President Trump saying media coverage is to blame for an apparent rift between him and intelligence agency leaders following their congressional testimony this week about global threats. The president yesterday tweeting a photo of his Oval Office meeting with intel leaders and writing, quote, just concluded a great meeting with my intel team in the Oval Office, who told me that what they said on Tuesday at the Senate hearing was mischaracterized by the media. And we are very much in agreement on Iran, ISIS, North Korea, etc. Their testimony was distorted press. All right. What do you, Jessica, I heard you sighing loudly during that tweet.
Well, it was on tape. I mean, it can't be distorted if you're just watching it. So the media didn't distort it. There was a rift. He goes out all the time and says things that contradict what the Intelligence Committee says. His base likes it, and that's just the kind of way we live here. So he could just say, we're on the same page and not have to bring up some media distortion part of it, because DNI Coates was very clear that they assess the threats differently than the president does. They don't think ISIS is defeated. They think Iran is complying with the deal. They think North Korea isn't denuclearizing, and he's running a different show.
What do you think about the intelligence chiefs staying on with the president, not quitting and staying with him and meeting with him and continuing to serve?
Oh, I think that they absolutely should. I mean, you're serving your country, right? And presidents come and go, and it's not about political affiliation. And, you know, I hope he is reading those briefings and taking them to heart. But, you know, when we watch something, it happened.
Melissa, some Democrats are coming out and saying, though, that the relationship between President Trump and the intelligence community, it accounts to a national security threat. What do you think about comments like those?
I mean, when you go hyperbolic, it undermines your whole entire argument. So while, you know, when the president says that, you know, we can get out of Syria and everything's fine and ISIS is defeated, there are, you know, a lot of people that would disagree with him on that front, and a lot of people that, you know, he trusts. And I think that in fairness, you know, he's listened to those arguments and responded, and he's even changed his mind on things based on the advice that he's given. And you know, that makes sense. I can understand people in the intel community being frustrated. I think when he goes out and makes a statement or he makes an announcement on Twitter and they're frustrated that they disagree and didn't hear about it first and that sort of thing. But it doesn't amount to a national security crisis. And when you say that, all of a sudden everybody rolls their eyes and kind of leaves the conversation.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. When you say something like that, people say, oh, they're saying Trump's going to end the world again. All right, the world's still been here every time that they've said that, so I think that we're good. Do you think that the relationship between the intel community and President Trump is an issue, or do you think it's fine how it is?
I mean, you want that to be as close as possible. I like your point, though. It seems like the president has changed some issues, changed his decisions on some things, so I think he's receiving some input well, and let's pray he continues to do that.
I do. Because it was Chuck Schumer who said he was calling for an intervention, which I don't know what that looks like between the intelligence community and the president. I think it's kind of like go big in the primaries, right? Like say the most extreme thing, hoping that we're going to get to the 50% line, and maybe that tweet, at least half of it, was getting there, right? That he's saying, no, we're on the same page, calm down, we're not getting out of Syria, we will still talk to allies, NATO, whatever.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Thanks for having me, ladies.
Guess what? We got more Outnumbered. More in just a moment.
What? Yeah. Perfect. Even better.
Thank you to Mike Slater. It was your first time on the couch. What did you think? How'd it go?
Outnumbered and outmatched by you ladies.
Okay, we love it.
Thorn between roses. I love you. Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Thank you to Mike Slater. We are back here on the couch on Monday. Now, here's Harris.
And we have breaking news awaiting remarks from President Trump just 2 weeks away from another government shutdown, possibly. Outnumbered overtime now. I'm Harris Faulkner.